Hi, I'm Christine from Poised for Success, and today I'm going to be talking to you about one of my all-time favorite training tools, the clicker. The basic principles behind clicker training were initially developed with marine animal trainers, those who work with dolphins and such. They developed a system by which they would wait for the dolphin to offer a particular behavior, perhaps jumping up in the air or whatever dolphins do, and they would blow a whistle and throw the dolphin the fish. And they found that over time, the dolphins would start to offer more and more frequently the behaviors that they were getting the whistle and the fish to carry out. From there, they were able to train the dolphins to carry out those particular behaviors in response to a particular signal, and there you have the dolphin shows. Dog trainers began to incorporate those principles into training using a clicker instead of a whistle, I believe in the early 1990s. I'm not 100% sure on that. I became familiar with clicker training around the year 2002, 2003. Back then, it really wasn't that popular in dog training circles. I actually did not have a trainer available to me at that time who could teach me how to train with a clicker. And that was before we had YouTube and all the internet resources that we have. I actually started my clicker training using books that explained the principles, gave details of basic exercises, and I took off with it from there. I've used a clicker to train my dogs for canine musical freestyle, rally obedience, agility, tricks, canine parkour, and I even used a clicker once to help a reactive dog learn to be calm and focused and confident instead of reactive and fearful in the presence of dogs and people. I use the clicker for behavior modification. I use a clicker with fearful dogs to help them gain confidence. And I use the clicker for everyday basic things like keep 4 on the floor instead of on the counter. The options with this training tool really are endless. I love the clicker for its precision, its clarity, and its versatility. For me, the clicker is a mode of communication with my dog, particularly when my dog is learning something new, but I also use the clicker quite a bit in refining behaviors that my dog already knows and helping my dog be able to perform those behaviors in new and different situations. A clicker is typically a small plastic box, they come in other shapes as well, that has some sort of button that you press that makes a sharp, quick clicking sound, like that. Now, to a dog who's never worked with a clicker before, that means absolutely nothing. But what we do is we teach our dogs that hearing this sound means a treat is coming. And then, once the dog has learned that basic concept, we teach the dog that performing particular behaviors makes the click happen. Sometimes behaviors that the dog chooses on his or her own, or sometimes carrying out behaviors that the handler has cued. One of the things that I appreciate most about clicker training is that most clicker techniques give the dog the opportunity to make choices. Now, this does not mean that we turn the dog loose in the world and just sort of sit around waiting for behaviors to happen. Of course, we work with our dogs in situations that are safe and conducive to learning at the stage of training where the dog is. I'm going to be doing some demonstrations in this video today where I'm working with my dog Tessa. She's off leash and we're outdoors. She has enough experience in training that she's able to concentrate and learn and work with me, and she's safe off leash in this particular context. I would never bring a brand new untrained dog into a context like this, turn the dog loose, and sit around waiting for the dog to carry out some random behavior. A little bit of vocabulary here. When I say the word mark, What I mean is, I'm clicking at the moment when my dog is making a choice that I want to communicate to my dog is a good choice. And if you were working with your dog on a sit, and as your dog is moving down into the sit and his or her rear end is about to hit the ground and you click, you're marking that behavior. You're basically telling your dog, I am really, 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 really happy that your rear end just hit the ground and you're going to get a treat for that. Sit. Good job. What that does is it's going to make it a lot more likely for your dog to offer the behavior again. And that's our next vocabulary word, offer. Offer is when the dog makes a choice to do something in particular. So if your dog is standing there and your dog sits, we could say your dog offered a sit. You didn't ask your dog to sit. If you said to your dog, sit, your dog is responding to a known cue. But if you were just standing there and your dog looked at you and sat, we would say your dog offered a sit. Good boy. To reinforce is to give your dog something that he or she wants after they perform the behavior that you wanted them to choose and you've marked the behavior. So if my dog sits, I click, I hand my dog a little piece of chicken, I've reinforced my dog for sitting. A reinforcer does not technically have to be food. A lot of people will use toy play as a reinforcer. But the key to the reinforcer is that it's always something that the dog wants, something that's desirable to the dog. So if your dog doesn't like to be touched on the head while you're training, and I've had dogs that have enjoyed snuggling during downtime, but during training they really don't want me petting them, that's not reinforcement. You really can't use that as a reinforcer, even if your dog likes it in another context. A reinforcer is always something that the dog wants in that moment. So it's always important when you're working with your dog to make sure that you have a reinforcer available that your dog actually wants. One thing that I'd like to talk to you a little bit is the mechanics of using a clicker. It's really as simple as pressing the button and handing the dog a treat. Now, I know some people find it a little bit overwhelming to have the idea of having this in your hand while you're trying to train your dog. I will say from experience, it gets to be second nature. But if you really have trouble with it, you can substitute a tongue click in place of a mechanical clicker, and you can get pretty much the same results. My dogs are all trained to a tongue click, and they respond to it as well as they respond to a clicker. With a dog who's afraid of the clicker at first, you have a couple of options. Again, you can start with a tongue click. Most dogs are not bothered by that. When I first started training my dog Tessa, who had been a stray, she was afraid of the click of a mechanical clicker. And I actually started her clicker training with a tongue click. Once she understood the tongue click, I substituted a very soft clicker, and she by then was able to understand that it was the same thing. Gradually we built up to the full box clicker, and these days she absolutely loves the sound of the click. One thing that's important when you're using a clicker to train is timing. You want to click as close to the point where your dog makes the choice to carry out a particular behavior as you possibly can. Now, let me say this right off the bat. You're going to make mistakes. Sometimes you're going to click too early. Sometimes you're going to click too late. And that's okay. Those repetitions come out in the wash. We all make mistakes. Be sure to give your dog a treat when you click, even if your timing was a little bit off, because that's the contract that we establish with our dogs when we're working with the clicker. When I click, you are going to get a treat, even if I've clicked at completely the wrong time. One thing that can be very helpful, if you've never used a clicker before and you're developing clicker timing, is to think of your clicker in the way that you think of your smartphone camera. Imagine if you wanted to take a picture of your dog and your dog was sniffing, but you knew your dog was going to look up at you at some point and you were going to get a really good picture of your dog in a beautiful environment looking at you with a happy expression on his or her face. So you're waiting for your dog to look up. You know your dog is going to do that soon. So you're poised with your smartphone at the ready. You're ready to hit that little button. And the second your dog starts to look up, you hit that button. Because you know, by the time your finger actually hits the little button of the camera, your dog is going to be giving you the pose that you're looking for. You're doing the same thing with the clicker. So imagine you've tossed a treat and you want to use the clicker to mark the moment when your dog starts to turn and come back to you. You're going to pretend you're holding your smartphone camera and you want to get a picture of your dog just starting to head back. So your dog starts to turn, you click, hand your dog a treat when he or she gets to you. It's a good way to think of it, and a lot of people find that very helpful. When we're training with the clicker, there are a variety of techniques that you can incorporate use of the clicker into. One of the most popular training techniques that people use the clicker for is a process called free shaping. When you and your dog are free shaping, you have an end behavior in mind, and you actually click and give your dog treats when your dog tries and figures out what we would call approximations of that behavior. So suppose you wanted your dog to stand inside a hula hoop that you have on the ground, and you toss a treat away, and your dog starts to approach the hula hoop. You could click, toss another treat away. Now your dog approaches the hula hoop and maybe puts one paw inside of it. Click, toss a treat away. Your dog comes back, puts two paws inside of the hula hoop, and so on and so on and so on until your dog is actually coming to the hula hoop and sitting. You can build behavior through successive approximations by using the clicker. Yes, good boy. Yes, good job, nice. Another training technique that is very conducive to use of the clicker is something called capturing, which is similar to free shaping, but instead of clicking and treating approximations, when you're capturing, your dog is going to offer pretty much the finished behavior in one fell swoop, and you'll click and give your dog a treat for that. Good boy. Nice. The clicker can also be incorporated into training when you're using lures or targets. So suppose you're using a target stick to teach your dog to twirl in front of you. You can actually lead your dog with the target stick and click at some point to communicate to your dog, this movement is what you're learning right now. All of these techniques work for training behavior. All of these techniques can lead to a dog who can perform the behavior eventually on cue and without the clicker present. And that leads me to one more point that's really important. You are not married to the clicker forever. The purpose of the clicker is learning. Beautiful. Nice job, girly girl.